welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there on your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's EcoCast is ins and outs of cyber insurance, protecting the organization against ransomware damages. Hard for me to imagine a more relevant or important topic, and something that has so much interest these days. I want to start by saying a big thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. You are all over the place. I see C or Cy from Michigan, Ivan from Plano, Texas, Jim from Rapid City, South Dakota. I see Dustin and Martin and Jose and Ralph and Elena from DC and Murray from California. And you folks are everywhere, all over the place. We are delighted to have you here. And today, we are going to have some great presentations from some of the top countries. Boy, it feels like Friday to me, or maybe Monday, I don't know. Some of the top companies in this space, and that includes Rubrik and Delinea and Pantera. So, as you might have gathered from the slip up here at the beginning, I am Keith Ward, your moderator for today, and you've just met Jess a few minutes ago, and you will also be hearing from our other fantastic moderator, that is Scott Becker, and you will be hearing from him in just a minute as well. So you get the whole gang. That's pretty exciting, isn't it? But in addition to us, some of you will get help with your Christmas shopping today, because we are giving away three $300 Amazon gift cards to 3 lucky winners. As just said at the beginning there, you do have to be present for the entire event to be eligible to win. So 3 of you are going to walk out of here a little bit richer today. And with that, folks, why don't we get to our keynote and kick this off the right way? Joining us for the keynote will be Alan Liska. Alan is a ransomware expert and industry veteran who is basically unparalleled right now. I've worked with Alan a long time as an author and as a presenter and everything, and he's just the best, knows all about cyber insurance and where that is going. And he is going to be joined by the aforementioned Scott Becker for what promises to be an illuminating conversation. So, Scott, Alan is ready, so why don't you take it away?
All right, so we're here to talk about cyber insurance, and insurance can be boring. I've got my own policy here, which is not cyber insurance, but the paperwork is extensive, language is dry, archaic, choices are bewildering. The whole process is sleep-inducing, and the bureaucratic process involved in getting sign-off internally can be Byzantine. But when it comes to cyber insurance, all that boring setup can come to a very exciting moment if ransomware hits. So we're here today with Alan Liska, one of the foremost experts on ransomware, to talk about some of the things that Alan's seeing with cyber insurance these days. Alan, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited for the conference.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about what are the trends that you're seeing with cyber insurance, overall. So, maybe we can start out with, is it getting harder or easier to obtain cyber insurance?
It's getting a lot more difficult to obtain cyber insurance. There were a spate of news stories last year and at the end of 2021 where insurance companies were talking about how much money they're losing on cyber insurance policies because so many people were getting hit with ransomware and business email compromise and other kinds of attacks and turning to cyber insurance to cover it. So cyber insurance companies have had to be much more stringent in who they hand out policies to, and a lot of that comes when you renew your policy and suddenly you find out that it's not just a bunch of checks that you have to hit. They're actually sending in companies to do pen testing and vulnerability analysis, and making sure that not just that you say you have policies in place, but you're actually sticking to the policies. It's almost like going through an ISO audit or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And alongside that, what's happening with the cost of the policies? Have they gone up? Especially with all the insurance the inflation everywhere. Do we see that with cyber insurance policies?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen some companies that have complained about their renewal being 2 or 3 times the cost of what it was. Cyber insurance came out, when it first came out as a policy for almost a decade. It was because the costs were so low to the insurance company, the premiums were so low. But with the advent of ransomware, business email compromise, and more advanced cyber criminal attacks, the costs have gone up for the insurance companies, and they've passed that on to their clients.
Is it really 2 or 3 times on increases?
It's not for everybody, but we have seen some people that have said that their premium has gone up to 2 or 3 times. So yes.
Wow. So what's happening with the coverage? Is that changing as far as like what's covered, and what are you seeing there?
One of the big things that we're seeing is that cyber insurance companies are no longer allowing payouts to be used to cover ransom payments for a lot of reasons. One, it just encourages the ransomware actors. We've seen this where ransomware actors specifically talk about looking for cyber insurance policies and then set the ransom payment based on what the cost of the or what the payout is. So if you have $1 million cyber insurance policy, your ransom payment becomes $1 million. So to avoid that, cyber insurance companies are, no, we're not. You can't use the money to pay ransom. But overall, the amount of services and the amount of capabilities available to you have stayed the same. Incident response, ransomware negotiator, recovery, all of the things that you normally think to use insurance for, all of that is still readily available to people who have cyber insurance policies.
So that's interesting. So if you have $1 million ransomware policy, but it's not covering the payout, does that mean you can't make a payout and like a ransomware payment and collect your insurance? Or because how do you separate what your costs are?
So you can still make a payment. Like the insurance company can't stop you from paying a ransom, but that can't come from the payout. You have to show how you're going to be using the money that you'll be getting as a payout. So you'll have to show, we have to buy this equipment, we have to pay this incident responder, we have to pay these legal fees, all of the things that are involved post ransomware attack. So you just, it's a matter of documenting the payment. Now, you could argue that, they were going to do that anyway, and they just took the money that they would have spent on their own, and they used that to pay the ransom, and then use the insurance policy to cover everything. But ultimately, legally, that gets the insurance company off the hook. And with increasing sanctions against ransomware actors and business email compromise actors and other cyber criminals, not to mention sanctions against nation state, from a legal perspective, the insurance industry is just trying to, cover their butt, basically. Like, we want to make sure that we're not going to be in any legal jeopardy if you use money to pay a sanctioned entity, and there are fines and so on involved.
Gotcha. In your view, dealing with clients and watching what people do, what are some of the services that come with a cyber insurance policy that have the most value?
The biggest thing, especially for smaller clients, is incident response capabilities. The insurance company can send in somebody immediately after an attack and help you start getting up and running. Now, you can do that separately, but if you haven't thought about that, if you haven't planned for that, trying to get an incident response company to come out immediately, which is when you need them, like you don't have a month to wait for them to, finish up their jobs.
Right.
can be really hard. So unless you've signed a contract with an incident response company, put a retainer down, and so on, when the ransomware attack hits, you may be waiting in line to get them. An insurance company can bring that out immediately, but also they have lawyers and they have ransomware negotiators and they have people who have dealt with sometimes hundreds of cases. They can offer a lot of really good advice on, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's how you handle your response. So if you haven't built a ransomware incident response plan, which you really should, but if you haven't, they can help augment some of that and fill in some of the gaps for you.
On the other side, what are some of the pitfalls? Like, what have you seen, where situations have really unraveled, when a company has a ransomware attack and they reach out to their cyber insurance provider?
So the big thing is knowing what your insurance provider provides. And if you don't know that in advance, then you can be stuck. You may be listening to this going, oh, great, I have cyber insurance. I can get incident response. I can get ransomware negotiation. And then you get hit and you find out afterwards, well, no, our insurance policy doesn't include that. So as long as, and this goes back to the boring documentation that you mentioned at the beginning, actually reading through that and then reaching out to your insurance company. You and I have talked many, many times about tabletop exercises. Yeah. One of the things you should consider as part of your tabletop exercises, what happens when we reach out to the insurance company and then find that out and document it, because you want to know what they can give you or what they will give you, what is included in your policy and what isn't. And again, you want to know that before the attack. So really the biggest thing that I've seen as a challenge during an incident is not knowing what to expect from your insurance company.
Gotcha. And Alan, one of the things I love about talking to you is you have a broad perspective. You've seen a lot of incidents at a lot of different organizations. And I wanted to ask you, how does cyber insurance typically get bought? Like, who's buying the cyber insurance in an organization? Is IT involved, or is it happening somewhere else in a lot of places?
It's a really good question, and it depends on the organization. A lot of times the insurance is taken care of by your risk department or your legal department, which, they, depending on the size of the organization, may be different. And just like your home and auto may be bundled, they may pick the provider that they already have. So we get all of our insurance from this one provider. We're going to add on a cyber insurance rider as well. And you and IT may find out about it when the survey from the insurance company comes or the pen testing from the insurance company starts to verify everything that's said in order to get the policy. So, now there are cases where that's different, where the CISO may say, no, we're going to go with this insurance provider and they take care of everything and it stays within the security and IT framework. But that's not always the case. And really, you should get involved and, again, find that out ahead of time.
Great tip. Thanks. I guess as we wrap up here, anything you see coming down the pike in 2024 as far as, cyber insurance, as it relates to ransomware?
No, I think it's one of the things that I've definitely seen is cyber insurance has become a net positive in reducing the number of ransomware incidents because they've gotten more particular about how they hand out policies, more stringent in their requirements. So, it almost is like going through that audit process where, you have to show, not just fill out on a form, but actually show that you have the processes in place that they require: multi-factor authentication, regular patch updates, asset management, sort of the table stakes, the basics need to be done. And that elevates that level. So I was working with one insurance company who told me that, compared to what they're seeing outside of their client base, their rate of ransomware infection is significantly lower because they have these requirements in place and because they do these regular checkups of their clients. It costs them more money to do it up front, but they also wind up saving money on the back end because there are fewer payouts because fewer of their clients get hit with ransomware.
All right. Well, Alan, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on and giving us some tips about this complicated area of ransomware defense. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Scott and Alan. Always fascinating and great to have Alan on. He is just a wealth of information, and I found it quite interesting to see how ransomware is actually being affected by cyber insurance in terms of making sure companies have the proper processes and procedures in place to help defend against ransomware. That makes perfect sense, but I hadn't really thought about it that way. So before we get to the first vendor session of the day, we've got a quick poll question for you. Let us know your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company. Are you doing it right away within a year, couple years, or hey, you may just not know at all at this point, which is perfectly fine as well. Keep voting in that poll. You got another minute or so to do that. Please let us know. This feedback is really valuable and important to us and to our vendors who present on each of our events as well. So thank you so much for doing that. And we are now going to move on to our first presentation of the day. This one comes from Rubrik, and presenting for Rubrik is Veer Choksi, the Senior Product Marketing Manager. Veer, we are happy to have you today. Looks like you are all ready to go. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Veer Choksi. I'm with Rubrik, and I've been here for about 2 years. Now, my goal here is to explain how you can use your own data to improve your cyber defense, and also to introduce data threat analytics, which is a set of capabilities that can help you detect threats better so that you can recover from cyber incidents quickly and confidently. And this presentation is geared towards both the IT and the security audience. Now, we all know that the cyber threat landscape has become challenging over the past few years. There's many reasons for this. The attack surface has grown a lot. Users are more distributed, and we have much more complex hybrid environments than in the past. It's also easy to become a cyber criminal, especially with ransomware as a service providers. So the barrier for entry for becoming a cyber criminal is a lot lower than it used to be. And also cybercrime remains financially rewarding. Now, before getting into my main content, I want to set the stage with some research from Rubrik Zero Labs, which is our threat research unit. We commission market research, we use third-party information, and also telemetry from Rubrik customers. 99% of IT and security leaders were made aware of at least one attack in 2022. Now, it isn't always ransomware necessarily. It could be data deletion, whether by a malicious actor or an insider or even accidental. And it could be politically motivated rather than financially motivated. But the bottom line is that cyber incidents are denial of data attacks. And when your data is down, your business is down. And on average, leaders dealt with attacks 52 times in 2022. So that's roughly once per week. Now, 93% of organizations reported malicious actors attempting to impact their data backups. Backups are often your last line of defense, and if your backups are not available and clean, the victim is much more likely to decide to pay a ransom to the cyber criminals. Now, about 73% of those efforts were at least partially successful. And so backups are something that both IT and security teams have an interest in. Now, out of over 27 million analyzed snapshots, about 21,000 of those contained anomalous activity. That's about 0.07% of the total. About 1,200 encountered an encryption event, and that's 0.004% of total. Now, notably, 100% of encryption events were previously identified as anomalous, and 100% of encryption events were tied to a lack of multi-factor authentication. Now, the number of impacted files could range from thousands to the millions, and nearly 3/4 of observed encryption events affected virtualization infrastructure. Now, traditionally, cybersecurity has focused on infrastructure security around prevention and detection in your production systems. But despite significant investments in infrastructure security and prevention tools, the risk of breaches can only be reduced. They can't be completely eliminated. Attackers are still penetrating these defenses. And so just as important as reducing the likelihood of a successful attack is reducing the impact of an attack. How quickly can business as usual be restored if an attack were to happen? And how can you, as a potential victim, make informed decisions to enable a successful recovery? Now, in spite of the security tools that are in place, there are still blind spots that can make recovery painful and drawn out. So malware might be lurking in your infrastructure. Endpoint detection and response tools can detect threats on devices, but they typically won't alert you to threats that are present on servers because they usually aren't deployed there. Second, it's difficult to accurately assess the blast radius of an attack, which could leave you in the dark on what exactly you need to recover. And third, it's not easy to determine when a threat entered your environment, and this could lead to reinfection and prolonged recovery. So all of these blind spots can increase overall cyber risk and increase downtime. So what if you could leverage your existing backup data to investigate threats and recover with greater speed and confidence? Everybody has backups already, right? So the main thrust of this presentation is that your own backup data can be a rich source of intelligence to improve your overall cyber resilience. Now, I'm sure that most folks have seen the federal government's cybersecurity framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And they're actually thinking of adding another phase, govern, but for now, these are the 5 phases. So let's focus in on the detect piece. Teams are asking questions like, can we determine the cause and blast radius? Can we minimize data loss? Can we determine the first point of infection? How can we easily conduct indicator of compromise or IOC sweeps without impacting production workloads? And how confident are we that an attacker is not present in our environment? Those sorts of questions can be addressed with data threat analytics. Now, data threat analytics refers to the ability to continuously monitor your data for risks and detect cyber threats. So the basic theory here is that if you're taking regular backup snapshots, you're in a good position to recruit your own data in the fight against ransomware and other cyber incidents. And that's because you're capturing the longitudinal time series history of data if you're protecting your data with Rubrik. Now, additionally, Rubrik manages metadata, including the content, users, and access privileges, which can help to shed light on your data security posture. Now, data security posture is a topic for another day. But by scanning hundreds of snapshots, Rubrik's data threat analytics engine generates signals that are fed into a highly trained machine learning model, building a historical baseline against which new data can be compared to find anomalous modifications, deletions, and encryptions. Again, we're capturing time series data from enterprise, cloud, and SaaS, feeding that data into the data threat engine, and that can result in really valuable security intelligence, shining a light on those blind spots so that you can make informed recovery decisions, and even automated remediation recommendations. So what can you do with data threat analytics? You can detect threats early by automatically identifying indicators of compromise within backups using an up-to-date feed of threat intelligence. You can determine the scope of ransomware attacks using machine learning to detect deletions, modifications, and encryptions. And you can prevent malware reinfection by analyzing the time series history of snapshots for IOCs to identify the initial point, scale, and time of infection. And because the scanning is done on backups, there's no impact to your production systems. Now let's take a look at each of these 3 services, starting with threat monitoring. So how this one works is that threat intelligence is fed into the Rubrik threat feed. The hashes and Yara rules themselves can come from different contributors. One of the contributors is Rubrik's own InfoSec team, so you can leverage the same intel that we're protecting Rubrik the business with. Intelligence can also come from Zero Labs, which is Rubrik's own threat research team, or it may come from third parties. Either way, we vet the threat intelligence prior to including it in the feed to ensure the quality of the intelligence is high and the threats are relevant to critical infrastructure environments. This intelligence gets downloaded at set time intervals. And when there's new intelligence available, a hunt will kick off automatically and search for threats based off the hashes and Yara rules. Now, should a match occur, you'll be notified right away via email. You can then drill down via the dashboard to see where the threat was located, what hash or Yara rule was matched, and find attributes associated with the hash or Yara for more background information to assist in potentially kicking off other threat hunts via Rubrik's threat hunting service or via third-party tools like a SIEM or an EDR. You can also quarantine the threat from within threat monitoring as well. So essentially, threat monitoring is a turnkey solution to help detect and protect your organization from threats. The intelligence gets downloaded automatically. Hunts based off of this intelligence will be automatic. And if any threats are found, you get notified about the threat, and any attributes associated with that threat will also be shared whenever possible. So it really is that simple. This is literally set it and forget it. The next service under the data threat analytics umbrella is anomaly detection. Now, anomaly detection provides a comprehensive approach to ransomware remediation. We use multi-stage machine learning to detect anomalies in your backup data. Those stages include observing file creations, deletions, and modifications, and comparing it to historical changes within that specific workload. In addition, entropy is analyzed to determine if ransomware-like encryption has occurred. And finally, if possible, we will identify the specific strain of ransomware as well. So if an attack has occurred, Rubrik automates the assessment of the blast radius to quickly understand what applications and files were impacted and when. And that eliminates the intensive manual labor that's usually required, such as bringing up a VM copy and manually comparing and scrubbing for changes. Finally, your backup file system has immutability. Since your data is never available in read-write mode, it can't be changed or overwritten. Fast and flexible recovery options can be used to revert back to the most recent clean version, whether using instant recovery, live mount, file level recovery, or orchestrated recovery. And that brings us to threat hunting. Threat hunting is a really powerful tool that lets you perform custom scans of your backups on demand for specific IOCs. You can identify the point of malware entry so that you can know what point in time to recover to avoid reinfection and minimize data loss. Threat hunting is both broad and deep. It allows you to scan multiple workloads and across time. It's also flexible. It can consume and search for threats via Yara rules, file hashes, and file patterns. These types of threat intelligence are industry standards. Thus, this allows you to leverage threat intelligence from various sources, such as internal sources, like your own InfoSec team, third-party intelligence services that could be paid or open source, from industry groups such as ISACs, and even government agencies that publish threat bulletins. And much like anomaly detection, threat hunts are done on backups, and thus there's no impact on your live production systems. Threat actors are unaware of ongoing hunts. And lastly, since Rubrik backups are immutable, you can identify IOCs that attackers have erased from production systems to cover their tracks. So in sum, threat hunting can shortcut the hunt for the point in time and the place where an adversary may have gained access to your infrastructure and help to define the clean recovery point so that you're not recovering with the malware still in place. So let's look at a typical ransomware attack and how data threat analytics fits in. Bad actors will establish initial access, followed by a lateral move, persistence, privilege escalation, recon, collecting, and staging. And finally, there is exfiltration and encryption. So anomaly detection pinpoints the impact on the target. So you can identify the blast radius so you know exactly what to recover and recover quickly. And threat monitoring and threat hunting identify when the attackers established access so that you can ensure a safe restore point. Now, threat monitoring is a passive activity, while threat hunting is more active if there are specific IOCs that you want to hunt for. Now, these are all very powerful when used in conjunction and help you to make sure that your recovery is as fast and safe as possible. So again, to recap, data threat analytics combines three really powerful threat detection engines. With threat monitoring, you can continuously scan for known threats to detect compromise before the damage is done. With anomaly detection, you can detect file system anomalies to identify data destruction and the blast radius of an attack. And with threat hunting, incident responders can hunt for indicators of compromise throughout the time series of data. So today we focused on data threat analytics, and this is part of a larger data security platform that we offer that includes data protection, data security posture, and cyber recovery as well. With all of these components, you can keep your data safe and make it easy to recover from cyber incidents. I did also want to mention that being cyber resilient is about more than just having the right technology in place. Rubrik also offers a ransomware recovery warranty that guarantees that your data will be available for recovery in case of an incident. We will pay out up to $10 million in recovery-related expenses if that is not the case. And so far, we've never had to pay out. Included with Rubrik support at no extra cost is our ransomware response team, which is a team of experts that's there to guide you during the high-stress moments after a cyber incident. And they've performed many successful recoveries. And like I've mentioned, Rubrik Zero Labs is our research group that delivers vendor-agnostic insights on reducing data security risks. And I encourage everyone to check out the latest report from Rubrik Zero Labs. So the question we should all ask ourselves is, can we afford to wait during downtime? And how much is that going to cost in both financial and non-financial terms, such as the reputational damage that a cyber incident can cause? And so a quick example, Lang's Building Supplies is a Rubrik customer that was able to fend off a ransomware attack with hardly any interruption to business as usual. They ended up without having to pay any ransom, had zero data loss because they had Rubrik's data security solution in place. Now that's cyber resilience. So thank you all for tuning into this webinar. I hope you found it helpful. And in closing, really briefly, the most important asset for an organization is your data. And you can have really great cybersecurity controls at the application, network, endpoint, etc. levels. But if an attacker does manage to get in and deny you access to your data, are you going to be able to recover within an acceptable time frame? Do you know exactly what was impacted? Can you be confident that your environment is free from known threats? Do you know what exact point in time you need to recover to minimize data loss and avoid reinfection? In today's day and age, you need to have good answers to all of those questions. And that's where data threat analytics applied to your existing backup data can really help. So thank you all again for your interest. And if you'd like to learn more, please get in touch.
Okay. Thank you, Veer, for that awesome presentation. A lot of goodness in there about ransomware and how to deal with it and what Rubrik can do for you. So I'm going to throw up another poll question. You can see it up there now. Tell us what additional resources you would like to see from Rubrik following this presentation now. And while that's up, it looks like we have a lot of great questions for Rubrik, and we can't get to those today, unfortunately, but I promise you that the Rubrik team will do their best to respond to all of the questions questions that have come in and will continue to come in. I also want to remind everyone about the handouts. We've got a link from Rubrik to its Zero Labs. Check that out if you'd like to get more detail and try that. And thanks to everyone who's responding to the poll. This feedback, again, is crucial to us, and we love that you're taking the time to do that and to tell our sponsors what you would like to see next. So I'm going to leave it up here for another second, and then we are going to move on to the first prize drawing of the day. And that is here now. The first $300 Amazon gift card to give away today goes to Jeff Wilms from Missouri. Congratulations to you, Jeff. We will be in touch about claiming your prize ASAP. And with that, we're going to move to our next presentation in the event today. It is this one is coming from Delinea, and joining us for what promises to be a fantastic session is Joseph Carson. He is the Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO. That is quite a title, and I'm sure he is going to prove to be worthy of it. Joseph, are you ready to go?
Absolutely, I am indeed, and many thanks for the warm and kind introduction. So I'm really excited about today's session. Hopefully this will be an educational one for the audience today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you here. So you can take it away now. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Excellent, thank you. So for everyone, my name is Joseph Carson, and I'm the Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO, and I'm actually joining you from Tallinn, Estonia. And Delinea is a company who was brought together from two previous companies. So just to let you know who Delinea is. The two companies formerly was Dichotic and Centrify. And those both companies came together and created the company Delinea. And we're a leader in privilege access management solutions, helping protect privileges on-premise and in the cloud, and in applications and all over your infrastructure and estate. Today's session, what I wanted to dive into is about some of the things we do throughout the years. We do quite a bit of in-depth research to try and understand things that are happening to organizations, what the trends are, best practices, and some of the attacker techniques. And this particular research that we did earlier this year was with over 300 organizations, and we want to understand about what their experiences was with cyber insurance around policies, what was happening with the renewals, and some of the kind of buyer guides that they had. And I thought today, given that this is focusing around ransomware and cyber insurance, kind of really delves into that area quite a bit, and that I would share with you some of the research findings that we had from that report. So first of all, one of the reality check that we have is that for many organizations around the world, what's keeping leaders like yourselves up at night? What's the challenges we face in order to protect the organization, in order to help the business succeed and the business be successful? And attacks are happening on a daily basis, whether it being malware trying to get into the organization through cyber attackers, through social engineering, phishing campaigns, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, default credentials, whatever it might be. Attackers are always looking for ways to get in, and malware can be one of those areas for backdoors. Whether doing data poisoning, whether it being financial fraud, which is a big area this past year around business email compromise and financial fraud. Those are areas that attackers are really looking to take advantage of. But also, for me, probably the biggest threat that we face in the past couple of years, and also the near-term future, is ransomware. Ransomware is devastating, and it really kind of causes a massive business disruption and financial impact to organizations. And this is something that we all have to be ready for. We all have to make sure that our policies and our strategy and our defenses are really thinking about ransomware resiliency. And that's something that many organizations are really kind of prioritizing. And there's other things here, of course. There's compliance we have to deal with. There's data breaches, which is really where ransomware is evolving this year, where it's becoming more about data extortion rather than encryption-based ransomware. So ransomware continues to evolve and really target organizations. And for many organizations, they're really looking for how they can make sure that they have this 360 degrees ability to protect a business. And it's not always about just defenses and its response. And organizations are really looking to cyber insurance to make sure that they they get themselves the ability to do financial risk coverage. And so organizations, in order to help protect their businesses, have actually reached and looked into cyber insurance. So I'm going to go into some of those details about the findings. One thing I want to kind of warn you is that in a lot of the policies that organizations and the research that we find, there's lots of gaps. Many organizations are not covered for lots of common types of cyber attacks. There's lots of let's say exclusions in there. There's lots of requirements in place. So I want to kind of delve into those gaps to make sure that you have the knowledge about what things you should be thinking about if you're going down the path of getting cyber insurance, or you're in the process of a renewal. This will help you prepare and better negotiate in order to maybe get a better premium or get actually a higher coverage as well. So this hopefully will be educational, help you prepare for those. It also might give you an idea of, maybe something that you're not thinking about right away, and you're thinking about in the future. It might also help you prepare some of the best practice defenses that will actually lead you to becoming insurable as well. So let's delve into some of those. So the first thing is, getting into the fine print. A lot of policies, and this also gets into a lot of difference between terminology as well. When we talk about certain things in the cybersecurity or IT world, it doesn't always necessarily translate into the same thing in legal terms and in the actually cyber insurance or broker world. Sometimes we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're not necessarily talking about the same thing. And I actually hopefully will cover some of those today. One of the big things is that many organizations face is this, the coverage of scope. Policies can be very different in regards to how much they cover the business, in regards to whether they cover the business for data breaches, or whether it's ransomware attacks that are encryption based, whether it's about business interruptions, liability claims, and so forth. So it's really important that when you're going down and getting cyber insurance, you want to make sure that you have the largest amount of scope coverage to the business as possible. And one of the reasons what happens here is that some businesses are quite large, that they sometimes have many different policies to cover different parts of the business. Like pharmaceutical companies might have one for the medical devices, and then they might have one for infections, and they might have one for research, one for finance. So they sometimes break those policies much further down into more specific business units. And also sometimes even a lot of the policies that actually get activated are sometimes even property or physical insurance policies that cover resulting from cyber attacks. So that's one thing, is to make sure that you're understanding about what the scope of what you're getting in the policy itself. The next thing is around limitations as well, is sometimes there's a cap, there's a top limit that the insurer will actually cover. And we've seen this being put in place significantly, especially for ransomware attacks, that there's a top level coverage. And sometimes organizations have got, again, going back into multiple policies to increase their coverage much further. If you look at going back at even the Target case, they actually had multiple policies in order to provide a much broader coverage as well. And then we get into deductibles. You might actually have to pay something out of pocket before even the insurance will be activated. So make sure that you understand about what that potential deductibles might be. And it might be different for different types of cyber claims. So it's really important to make sure what your actually coverage is. And when you do make those claims, that you're making the claim for the right type of policy as well. And also there might be areas around risk assessment underwriting. Typically, a risk assessment is done. Sometimes for smaller organizations, that might be a self risk assessment, like a questionnaire type of a practice. And then for larger organizations, it might be a much larger type of risk assessment, where it might be actually in person, it might be physical, and require sometimes either the insurer's own risk department, or it might be even a third party. And that risk assessment might have an impact on the outcome of what coverage you get, and even if you might be insurable as well. This area I've seen quite extensively is, can determine basically whether you get actually insurance at all. And it also aligns sometimes. A lot of these risk assessments are very similar to compliance type of related kind of policies and best practices. So if you are doing some compliance areas, this might help you accelerate into some of those risk assessment areas. The next area that we look at in the fine print is industry specific. And this gets into some of those even exclusions. If you're in a financial industry, you might have certain types of policies which are tailored for finance. If you're in infrastructure, if you're in cloud provider, if you're an MSP. So depending on the industry, education also will have different types of policies. So it's really important to understand about where you're fitting into some of those more tailored types of policies, because some industries are more targeted than others. If you look at healthcare and education, tend to be, even local government tend to be higher targets than other types of industries. A big area was around the policy exclusions. This is something that has been a big debate over the past couple of years, especially when we look back on the Merck case that was resolved earlier this year, where basically it goes back to the NotPetya in 2016. There was 11 or 12 policies, I believe, that was activated, around 700 million or so in actually claims. A lot of those were property claims as well. But ultimately from that, the insurers denied the claim, claiming that it was actually because the NotPetya was an act of war. And this gets into a long debate over many years. Eventually, earlier this year in May, the Supreme Court favored with Merck that since they are not a legitimate target of an act of war, therefore that exclusion would not apply. And therefore, the claim is now in a 1.4 billion in favor of Merck. So something around the policy exclusions that got into a bit of a debate, because now it means that if you have those policy exclusions, they might not apply if you're not a legitimate organization that would be a part of an act of war. And those who provide government contracts might be in a situation where they might apply. So it's really important to make sure that you understand about if those policy exclusions will be impacting your business or not. There's a lot of legal and regulatory requirements that you have to align to. For example, some compliance and regulations have reporting requirements that you have to do certain ways, and you want to make sure that those are not conflicting with the fine print. Sometimes it's around reporting. One of those reporting requirements, for example, is in the Data Protection Authority. You have to report within 72 hours. And there's other SEC, basically, incident response frameworks coming out as well. And in those scenarios, that the insurer has sometimes these fine prints saying that you actually might not be successful in a claim if you don't report to an insurer first. I did clarify that later with several brokers. And what they stated was that any costs that you incur prior to making the claim may not be covered. But when you do make the claim, then the costs it covers after that would be. So it's really important to ensure that you understand about what those reporting requirements might be. And again, the landscape is evolving consistently. One thing that we found out of this research and report is that it's really important to understand that cyber insurance is not cybersecurity. Cyber insurance is a financial risk safety net. It's all about making sure that when bad things happen, you have the financial capabilities to recover and get your business back to operations again. It's not actually improving cybersecurity. And it should not be considered cybersecurity. It's a financial safety net for the business when cybersecurity incidents happen. So it's really important that when you're going down the path of cyber insurance, it should be part of your cybersecurity strategy or program. And your cybersecurity program should not be part of your cyber insurance program. It should be the other way. It's all about making sure you're doing the right practices in order to mitigate and reduce the risk. So when you get down the path of getting cyber insurance, you want to make sure you align it and make sure that you're putting in the cybersecurity best practices. So let's move into some of the kind of areas that we kind of find. And this was the key finding, number one of the report, which insurance doesn't let you offer good security. Many organizations who had security and had cyber insurance in place, they actually have used their policies. If you look at in 2022, it was 38% and a little bit decline in 2023. And the shocking stat here is that out of those who had used their insurance policies and made claims, is that almost 50% actually had to do it multiple times, more than once. And then those who haven't used their policies have become, very static over the year, 20%. So this really shows you, and even 52% of smaller organizations had used those cyber insurance policies multiple times. So really kind of highlight here is that even if you do have cyber insurance, is that it's very likely that at some point in time during that policy, you will likely need to use it. And for some organizations and some industries, that means multiple times. And then we get into those exclusion and limitations. As I mentioned, we wanted to understand from many of those policy holders what types of exclusions did they have, what situations would cyber insurance be void. And for example, one of the top ones was not having the security protocols in place. And this typically means that you may have stated in the policy or question or risk assessment, you have certain security policies and protocols in place. And if at any point in time during the claim that it's found that they were not in place effectively, then the claim itself would be void. And also it goes in place for internal bad actors who are actually purposely, a lot of policies were actually having exclusions or void for internal risk factors for insiders. Also misconfigurations where employees actually didn't do the right thing or actually misconfigured or lost the device, some of those cases. And again, then I mentioned already about the act of war, act of terrorism, and not following up on the compliance procedures. So it's really important as you have those policies in place that you make sure that you're aligning it and making sure that you're actually doing the right things so that your policy doesn't become void. It's really important. The next thing also, one of the good things about this is that in most cases, for most organizations who responded to the research, is that it means more money for the business, more money for IT, more money for security. And one of the things we find is that from that, higher rates basically calls for bigger budgets. And this is in addition to your existing budget. It's not actually just giving you more of the existing budget. What it's doing is adding and covering cyber insurance more. So if you look at here, one of the things is that the policies and cost of insurance has increased significantly. So renewals is up between 50 and 100%. I did actually talk to a number of brokers this year, and this is because the research was done earlier this year, is that they did state that in the past year, those policy prices were a result from overcorrection. And it means that we should see this year those policy prices coming down again. So she would expect to see cyber insurance reducing it a little bit because in the past year, because of ransomware and other types of attacks, they did do an overcorrection, and therefore they're recorrecting that to be much more aligned with the industry. But we also see as well, the board is a big, strong driver. So if you're not getting pressure from within the business itself for cyber insurance, it will likely come from the board who will drive the requirements. I will say that there's two big drivers for cyber insurance in the business. It's either the executive board or it's actually cyber criminals, because most organizations tend to go down this path after they've had a breach to get cyber insurance, because they want to make sure they cover the financial cost of it again if it does happen in the future. So big driver here is the board. So one thing is that you might not be hearing for it at the moment, but I definitely recommend you should be prepared in the coming months to make sure that you do have consideration. You are aligning, you are getting examples of assessments, you are looking at some of the types of questions that the insurers would be looking for, and just doing a gap analysis. Just good readiness so that when the time comes that you do get the question about what's our situation with cyber insurance, this will also give you a better readiness. It also might give you a better understanding as well. If you are going down the process of a renewal, you might be able to put some of the best practices in place that will actually help you reduce some of those premiums and also become more insurable. So one of the things we find is that most organizations that were going through either getting new policies or going through the renewals, that they actually needed to implement more security controls, more security solutions. So these are some of the top solutions that were required. What was required by cyber insurance. So if you don't have an identity access management solution in place, if you don't have privileged access management solutions in place, you might have to actually acquire and implement those prior to becoming insurance. Those are some of the top mandatory. And again, also with multi-factor authentication, with managing passwords, having rotation and making sure passwords are complex and unique, monitoring sessions, recording, and then having a strong disaster recovery. And when I say disaster recovery, I do mean having a ransomware resiliently disaster recovery program, because disaster recovery doesn't always necessarily mean it's ransomware resilient. And it's really important to make sure you've got a ransomware resilient disaster recovery process in place. So if you don't have any these types of solutions in place and you're going in the process, either these will either help you make sure you become insurable, or they'll actually give you the ability to reduce the cost of the premium going forward. The next area is really thinking about more time and resources. And this is one thing we find as well as that organizations is that it takes a lot more people outside of the IT team and security team. So don't try to do this alone. Make sure you actually have the support from the business and make sure you actually get third-party expertise to help you, as that will help accelerate. And then the next area is really about, this is all about becoming more resilient to cyber attacks. We always look, one of my jobs in cybersecurity is all about risk reduction. It's about understanding the risk to the business, what things can help make the organization more resilient and actually become survivable from types of ransomware attacks that are impacting the business, to make sure they can move forward and make sure they can recover quickly and get back to operations. So it's all about becoming resilient and making sure you have the right things in place in order to make sure that the business can survive. Because at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the business is successful, and that's what our roles are, to make sure that we understand, we identify the threats, and we put the right tools and the right programs in place to help actually the business be able to continue when bad things happen. If you're interested in learning more details about this, we actually have made it's called Closing the Cyber Insurance Gap. It's the 2023 State of Cyber Insurance. So if you're interested in getting a copy of the report, we do have it in the handout. So I do recommend, if you're interested, go and download it. And then if you want to learn more about privileged access management, definitely chat with myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll be happy to show you more details about whether you're getting a demo or trial, or more insights, or just insights into success stories. So at that point, I'm happy to open up to questions. If you do have any questions from the audience, I'll be happy here to answer them and provide you more feedback. But definitely, do get a copy of the report. It is quite interesting. Will definitely help you prepare for those challenging, and sometimes tough questionnaires when it comes to cyber insurance.
All right. Thank you so much, Joseph. A fantastic presentation. One of the things that was illuminating for me in that was the role of the board of directors and how much more prominent that is getting in terms of what they are demanding that companies implement. So, I know the broad contours of this issue, but that's the kind of specifics that are really useful. So thanks so much for that today. While we get their questions ready for you, I wanted to put up a poll question. So we want to know what additional information you would like from Delinea and their solution. So please vote in that poll and keep voting. While I'm going to leave it up here while we go through some of the Q&A to give you plenty of chance to do that. So are you ready for some questions now, Joseph?
Absolutely. I'm ready, and we're ready to go.
Excellent. We got some great ones here. So Ross wants to know, how do you handle requirements for businesses that still run server 2008 or older due to legacy requirements? And I would probably broaden that to say any sort of legacy. It doesn't have to be Windows necessarily. It could be any legacy equipment. What are the requirements, and can you even get cyber insurance if your systems are real old?
That's a great question. One of the things that, there's a couple of different ways that insurers will typically approach those. One is they may not be in scope, so they may not be insurable. So that's one of the things that they might exclude. If those systems do get infected or are part of a breach, then they might not be in scope and may cause harm to the claim. So it's really important to kind of make sure that, as you're going through with those legacy systems, and this happens a lot. I've worked in government and financial and transportation and maritime and critical infrastructure, and I've seen these systems over and over again. I've seen them on the bridges of ships. I've seen them in ship management companies. So it does cause challenges. My recommendation is that in those situations, what happens is that because those systems can no longer be patched, or because you're depending on certain legacy types of security controls for even authentication and access and patching and so forth, that you have to build defense around them, and then you have to put the right security controls to really control that perimeter of those systems. So what you have to do is you either have to harden the security perimeter around those devices, or they might be excluded from the policy. And if they do, you have to think about what controls can you put in place in order to strengthen the security controls of them. It's a great question, and it's a challenge, and definitely will be an issue for organizations who are getting insurance, that they might cause challenges. They may cause either the premium to go up significantly or the scope to not be able to be covered.
Absolutely. Okay, here's one from Jeffrey. Really interesting. Is implementing zero trust, what effect will that have on cyber insurance premiums? And I should mention here that zero trust is not a product. It's more of a mindset on how to do security. But those principles certainly can apply. How would you answer that?
Absolutely. I'm really happy that you said that, because that's always one of my things, is that zero trust is not a product that you don't install zero trust. You can do certain use cases in a zero trust manner. So you're absolutely right. It's a mindset in how you operate your business in a secure way, is the kind of term that I always use for when we think about zero trust. When we think about certain things in zero trust, absolutely, if you're practicing certain use cases or problems you're solving with a zero trust framework or approach, it can make a big difference in actually insurance. And actually, sometimes it can reduce the premium or give you better coverage. So some of those examples is a great way is during the authentication and privilege access management area. If you're practicing, for example, in your privilege access and privilege accounts, a principal lease privilege, which is a foundational control within zero trust itself, which means that you don't have overprivileged users, or you're removing, for example, as many as local administrator accounts as possible and placing those with privilege elevation on demand. If you're taking those approaches and you're adding additional security controls and you are doing that zero trust framework and strategy, absolutely, it will have massive, actually a significant impact to your insurance premium, either getting much better coverage because you've got those types of practices in place, or it will actually even reduce your premium in some cases, giving you a better return on investment.
Absolutely. Okay. We are running low on time here, Joseph. I want to fit in one more question before we let you go. This has been so much fun. Adam wants to know, and I'm going to kind of just condense his question. What is the largest misconception that you run across when it comes to companies when they're getting, or they're examining, looking into getting cyber insurance? What do they seem to get wrong or misunderstand?
That's a great question. I think one of the things I've found is, because I've been fortunate enough that my background is very much in the security industry. And I've been fortunate enough to also being very engaged in the insurance industry as well. And I find terminology, the biggest difference is that you want to make sure that when we're talking about terminology, when you're talking with your broker or you're getting a premium or you're doing assessment, you want to make sure you're talking about the same thing. Because, for example, in the IT and security, when we think about, let's say, data recovery, we think about restoring from backups. We think about restoring it from images or getting backup from trusted sources. But when we actually look at data recovery in the insurance terms, if you look at getting into those legal aspects, it can also mean paying the ransom, which isn't something that we would consider as part of data recovery. That would be considered paying the ransom. So it's really important to make sure that when you're in this area, that's probably for me is the biggest area that was a bit of a shock, is that sometimes we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're not. So it's really important that sometimes when you do see those terms like data recovery, make sure you're on the same page about what it means. And does that mean paying the ransom? And who's going to pay the ransom? Is it the insurer? Is it a third party? So getting into some of those areas and in clarity, I think those are important, because for me, it was a bit of a shock when I find that sometimes we're not on the same page.
Well, that is great advice. As a philosopher would say, the definitions are so important, knowing exactly what you're talking about, and you're speaking the same language,
Absolutely.
so to speak. So there's no misunderstandings on what the coverage is. So Joseph, this has been so much fun today. Thank you for the amazing presentation, your insights in the Q&A. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you here. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Many thanks, and it's a pleasure for everyone. And always reach out if anyone has any additional questions or wants to follow up on my research. Thank you.
For sure. I want to mention also that, there's a bunch of questions we couldn't get to today because there were just too many. So much interest from all of you. And Delinia will follow up on all of that stuff. In addition, I want to remind you of the Delinia handout that we have got in the handout section. It is a free handout, and it's a book on cyber insurance. So download that now from the handout section and look that over. A fantastic free resource that you really should take advantage of. I mean, that's one of the reasons you come here for these events. So with that, I am going to move on to the second gift card prize drawing of our event today. And the winner of the $300 Amazon card for this session is Brad Belcher from Minnesota. congratulations to you, Brad. We will be in touch ASAP about getting you your prizes. And with that, let's move on to what is going to be our final presentation of the EcoCast. This comes from Pantera, and presenting for Pantera is Thomas Poor, the Director of Product Marketing. And I am excited to say that Thomas is also going to be joining us after his presentation. We're going to do some more Q&A, which is fantastic. Thomas is ready to go right now, so I am going to turn this over to him. Thomas, you have the floor. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Keith. So today we're going to talk about building ransomware resilience with Pantera. So who am I? My name is Thomas Poor. I am a product marketing director for Pantera. I'm a longtime Blue Team member, incident responder. I've spent quite a bit of time with ransomware live response. I've taught ethical hacking, and I continue to be a consultant and educator and a lifelong learner. Part of my history, I have 20 years experience in network security and really the domain of NetFlow for network detection and response, as well as encrypted traffic analysis and behavioral anomaly detection. So as a recent member of the team, what I want to do is I want to really walk you through why is ransomware such a hot topic? Why is it important as it relates to insurance, and how can we help you avoid some of the challenges? So at the heart of it, what does Pantera do? What we're doing is we're really trying to protect your environment against ransomware. We're helping you identify and know whether your security controls are working. And when we do find some gaps, what we're doing is we're giving you a prioritized remediation path to really build your fortification against attacks. So your challenge is to avoid a crisis response. And unless you've gone through a ransomware event, you may not necessarily be familiar with this term. Even a small event can cost a significant amount of money. So let's say that you have a ransomware event. Let's say that it impacts 100 devices, and during the attack, the attacker was able to exfiltrate 209 gigabyte of data. Let's say that you do have an IR retainer. You've built some of the security strategy in place, and let's say that the retainer is $500 an hour. What a lot of people don't realize is if you need to call live response to come in, and they need to look at 100 assets at $500 an hour, a lot of times there's minimum costs associated to that, like 4-hour minimum per asset. That's going to be a workstation a lot of times. And some of the IRs vendors have 8-hour minimums per server. So in this one scenario that I was working, there were 100 assets that were impacted, and just the asset investigation alone was $200,000. And then, we ended up getting, hands on the data. But at that point, we needed to understand what data did they take. And we can't assume they deleted any copy of it, and that data could end up, out in the wild. So we had to, recruit data mining services, and that's about, $1,000 per gig, and then after all the other legal fees, the fees for the communication team, all of the asset downtime while systems were rebuilt, the productivity loss from employees, added up to like another, over $300,000. So in a scenario where a $1 million ransom occurred, what ended up costing the organization was $700,000, and a lot of that would fall on the insurance company itself. And the insurance company is going to pay that out, or they're going to find a way to try to deny the claim associated to that, right? And then if you're making a claim, then you're gonna see increased premiums, if they don't drop you. So the insurance challenges, they revolve around security, control effectiveness. So whether or not you have what you say you have, at time of application or time of renewal, right? So understanding that you have a firewall, understanding that you have an IDS or an IPS, understanding that you have a SIM or some sort of automated response, and so they are checking to see whether or not you have controls. But one of the challenges that exist is whether or not the controls are actually working. Our elite credentials being used to access because MFA doesn't exist on all parts of the environment. The EDR deployed, whether or not malware is able to bypass the EDR. Maybe it's installed, but the policy is not put in place where it's actively preventing it, right? So it's really understanding whether or not the controls in place are working as expected. And one of the other major challenges is really the changing attack surface, right? So traditionally, insurance is a point in time assessment, of the security controls inside your environment. However, at that time, shortly thereafter, and I've always said in the terms of, monitoring networks, and the network evolves, every 2 weeks. It's very, very different. So you have new assets that come in. There are new cyber threats, new threat actor groups that are popping up. You may be deploying new cloud architecture or hybrid cloud architecture, or making policy changes within your environment. And so there's a constant change of the attack surface. And so, to do a one-time assessment really leaves, an organization at risk, but also, it leaves a lot of risk for the insurance company as well. And in insurance companies, they think in lists, right? So part of this is really, they want to see that, you've got, vulnerability management put in place, and you're looking at the CVEs, and you're looking at the configurations and credentials. And, this is just an example of, one of the application pieces where, it's very minimal as far as defining the security efficacy within the organization. And nowhere in here does it say that there's a requirement to revalidate that all of these things are in the environment at all times. And that's really where things fall down. A quote I heard from one of our customers was, a control that is not measured continuously will degrade over time. And I see that to be very true. In the example I walked through earlier, where I was part of the live response, there were controls in place. However, they weren't necessarily being exercised and monitored, on a regular basis. So another challenge is really like evolving the strategy, right? We need a better way to understand our opponent. Defenders think in lists, and we see the insurance company really pushing that, as part of the policy application process and the renewal process. And while those are becoming more stringent and more, validation of certain controls in place at that time, attackers think in maps, and they're very creative. They don't think in lists, right? So, how do we evolve the strategy to, improve our security defenses and lower the cost of potentially making a claim with insurance, right? So it's really adapting that attacker mindset. And so in the case of ransomware, what we want to do is we want to test against known ransomware campaigns, right? What better way to test the effectiveness of the controls that we've put in place? We've invested a lot of money in those controls, so let's validate the investments are actually fruitful. And so in this case, we're going to, we would come in and allow you to validate with real ransomware campaigns. So real end-to-end operational flow of ransomware, multiple campaigns, and we've built this capability with safety in mind, ready for production environments. So a lot of times, we think that, why would we ever want to run ransomware? Well, what we've done is we've created a safe way to test all of the aspects of your controls, right? So are they really working, right? You've got, you have your users, the human element, passwords, and we almost always required to have multi-factor authentication on. We have our EDR components, and that's very pervasive across every asset that you can install on, although a lot of times it may not be, right? And it's only that one asset that an attacker can take advantage of. We have our NDR, we have our XDR deployments, we have our SIM, and then we have, all of the inspection appliances, our IDS, our, the prevention center, the DLP, right? Are we losing data? And then we have our VPNs and our external facing assets and understanding what our external exposure is, right? So are we actually, effective in preventing threat actors from coming in? So Pantera is really designed to remove the uncertainty and help build that confidence that you are resilient to ransomware. So at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, I get it. I need to, test my environment against ransomware, but how do I do that safely? I can't just, get a piece of ransomware, deploy that in my environment, and then hope that it doesn't, take down my assets, my crown jewels. You're thinking, hey, I need to prevent outages, not create them, or can this be effective in a lab? And a lot of times what happens in a lab, the lab is designed in a certain way that doesn't truly represent what's happening in the production environment. And a lot of organizations think that just because they have EDR in a firewall that they're protected, and that's absolutely not the case. And then there's this, I have cyber insurance, I'm covered sort of attitude. And having cyber insurance is not a reason to have poor security, nor is it a reason to have good security that goes untested and unexercised. And so with Pantera, what we're able to do is we're really able to, exercise that environment, right? So we're going to take a set of credentials and we're going to understand, what is the impact associated to a set of credentials. So that could be a user role, it could be like a developer role, or a local administrator, and really understanding, can a threat actor use a set of credentials and progress across the environment and create a very damaging situation for the organization. So what we'll do is we'll validate whether or not privilege escalation exists. We can enumerate the files on a host. We're able to identify whether or not the EDR or endpoint protection is effective at blocking malicious payloads. And then we're able to identify, and we'll test if you can make connections to, C2 domains that are often used with threat actor communication. We will, test the EDR in multiple ways to see if that, we can either uninstall it or bypass it or, cripple it in some way. But then also we want to identify whether or not it will catch if we start encrypting the file. So we try to walk through the entire attack chain for ransomware families, and whether or not you're going to be resilient to those. And then finally, whether or not data can be exfiltrated from your environment, which is very key in a lot of the double extortion, which is very top of mind these days. So with a simple test setup, we can define the initial access. What we're going to do is we can use manually defined credentials. We have integrations that allow you to bring in credentials with such as CyberArk. You can test user accounts, both local user accounts. You can test service accounts, domain credentials, as well as test in multiple domain environments. And then what we want to do is we want to set up the threat actor that we want to test against. In this case, we'll set up against Lockbit, and we can change, and turn some knobs on whether or not our EDR is effective, whether or not it's like a full encryption of files, or whether or not it's a fast encryption. And we can actually be very selective with the files and the file extensions to test whether or not the endpoint is able to identify, the endpoint software is able to identify those file extensions as known. And then finally, because Pantera is able to progress the attack, we have the option to automatically allow the approval of that attack progression. And then we have the data exfiltration, which is pretty awesome, because what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to test whether or not your IDS or your DLP is working effectively. It's going to test your threat intel. So a lot of you probably have third-party threat intel feeds, and those may be integrated into like an NDR solution or an IDS solution. So we allow you to customize and customize your C2, or what you can do is we allow you to leverage known IOCs in for these threat actors, and this is really going to give you that true exercise on whether or not we're able to communicate to these sites and whether or not we're able to get data out of those sites. It's key to know that we're never taking your data out. What we're doing is we're emulating the act of moving data out, because that does have true impact for ransomware. And then finally, the key to this is really continuous validation. We allow you to schedule this, and then you want to evaluate and then improve. You're to go and fix any of the security gaps that pop up, and then we'll retest, right? And so this can be done continuous and as much as you'd like. And you'll get a very detailed report, with a resiliency score and exactly what happened in the environment. All the host findings, as well as the guided remediation steps. Everything gets mapped back to MITRE, so you can test your, measure your defenses against the MITRE TTPs. And, with every run, that as we evaluate whether or not, you're resilient to ransomware, we provide a resiliency score on whether or not, we were able to bypass endpoint, whether or not we were able to move data out of the environment, whether or not we were able to perform host takeovers. So we were going to grade, we're going to remediate, and then we're going to validate. And this is really the big story of Pantera in general, right? Which is that continuous security posture. We're going to configure our tests, we're going to run them, and we're going to remediate, and then we'll repeat that over and over again to really build that resiliency. So, thinking back to, how do I better protect against making insurance claims? How can I, connect with the insurance company to help potentially reduce my premiums? Is really this concept of moving away from, a checklist of what security controls I have in place to more of let's evaluate whether or not the security controls are effective. So I would really encourage everyone to go to Pantera.io. We offer a 1-day proof of value where, our team will come in, and within like 4 to 6 hours, we will really show you, what this looks like. And we can run an example ransomware test inside your environment to establish your readiness. And with that, Keith, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Thomas. Wow, what a great presentation. Love to see what Pantera is doing and what the solution can do in terms of helping keep some of those cyber insurance costs down too, because of all the things that you offer. I am going to throw up the next poll question while we get into some Q&A. So let us know what additional information you would like about the Pantera solution. Keep voting in the poll while Thomas and I go through some of your best questions. Thomas, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Outstanding. I also wanted to make one more mention and remind everyone there is a handout from Pantera in the handout section. That is a data sheet on ransomware readiness. It is free, and I encourage everyone to download that now as well while we go through some Q&A. Okay. So there's been a lot of questions coming in, a lot of interest in what Pantera is doing. So let's dive in now. Elizabeth has a really interesting question. She wants to know, how do you pitch cyber insurance to management? How do you get their buy-in? I don't know if there's any tips or tricks you can provide in that regard.
how to pitch this to upper management.
Yeah, how do you get them? What do you say to convince them? Hey, we need cyber insurance here. What? How do you, the ones who don't want to spend money? In other words, the C levels who talk about budget. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so so cyber insurance really should be a no-brainer at this point. The cost implications are so great if a breach were to occur. Unless you've put together a savings account, in excess of a couple of million, to really depending on the size of your organization, and you're willing to foot the bill associated to all of the breach costs, and there's just such a giant unknown associated to it. I think that you need to bring in the calculated risk, right? And so when you look at your organization's security posture, like a solution like Pantera coming in and really showing you where your gaps exist, and then making it a business decision on whether or not those gaps can be immediately remediated, or does it involve, updating out of date hardware. I think it really comes down to that business decision on whether or not they should, go with cyber insurance. But it's pretty much a guarantee that it will help you, offset some of the costs in a breach for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And to elaborate on that a little bit, I think it's useful to mention to your to whoever you have to go to who handles the budget, what are the costs of not having cyber insurance, and compare those to whatever the policy costs you. And to me, that would be a pretty dramatic way to convince them that you do have to have something like this. Okay. So next up, how are organizations best leveraging ransomware testing like the kind that Pantera offers to improve their resilience to attacks?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's interesting because not a lot of organizations have the opportunity to test their production environments against ransomware. When you think about it, where would you even start, right? I think that where a lot of organizations get hung up is just like the act of doing this. And so, without having to install like an agent, and not being a simulation of events, it's a true emulation of all of the TTPs associated to a ransomware campaign. What organizations are doing is they're using this, in a monthly basis, and a lot of them are now performing ransomware tabletop exercises to test not only the readiness of their security operations center, but also of the other areas of the organization, as it relates to what would a crisis response look like, and and what is that impact associated to it. So tabletop exercises are one of the growing trends I've seen among our customer base, and how they're really leveraging this on an ongoing basis.
Let me follow up with that a little bit, because tabletop exercises are the kind of thing that sound great. And especially with ransomware, everyone in the industry, or most people, know about tabletop exercises. Is it your experience, Thomas, that they actually are starting to use tabletop exercises, or is it more still kind of a buzzwordy thing that people think is a great idea, but they're not really doing? I don't know if you have any sense of that.
Yeah, it's funny that you ask. Since the MGM attack, I've had multiple customers reach out and share that they have started performing tabletop exercises. It was like one of the biggest questions that we received at Pantera, which is, how do we not end up like, MGM, right? And you have to test your environment, and it really doesn't matter if you have the controls in place, because if you're not testing your controls and you're not testing your response, you'll never understand where your true security gaps exist.
Right. And in fact, the fallout from that MGM attack is still being felt today. Great point. Okay. Another question that's specific to Pantera. What does the deployment look like? And does the deployment involve putting agents into the network onto the servers.
Yeah. So I was starting to touch on that a little bit. So when you deploy Pantera, what you're doing is you're deploying the appliance in your environment under the assumption of assumed breach. Now that would be an asset in that IT environment, uh, and really you don't need to do anything else. There's multiple scenarios that you can run, such as a total black box, like the Pantera box has no idea about your environment, and it will go and it will identify exploitable vulnerabilities that exist in the environment, and it will progress the attack in a safe by design manner, meaning all of the exploitation progression has been vetted through our research team to not create any sort of outage or anything like that. It's essentially becomes like a disarmed payload, right? So all it's doing is it's moving across the environment, but there's no agents. Agents are typically associated with simulation. What we offer is real progression, lateral movement, data exfiltration, and showing you exactly what a threat actor would do should they get inside that environment.
And to emphasize again, completely safe. No worries there, because I could see, and cybersecurity admin or security admin really worried about what is this going to do to my network. So have no fear with anything like that with Pantera for sure.
That's correct. Yeah, no, we have an extremely large research team that thoroughly vets anything that goes into our solution, just to ensure that. I mean, we have some very, very large customers that cannot afford any downtime, so that is a critical component to our offering.
Great. Okay, Thomas, this has been really fun. So last question, just to wrap everything up before we let you go. If someone wants to get started with Pantera, what do you recommend is the very next step they take right after this event ends in a few more minutes?
Yeah, I would suggest heading over to Pantera.io and submitting, a proof of value assessment. What'll end up happening is you'll engage with the team. We'll give you a quick demo of the solution, but really, what creates this wow factor is getting the team involved and seeing this in your own environment. And we will show you things that you had no idea existed in areas that that will be sort of eye opening, and how adversaries would take advantage of that environment. So I would consider going, filling out the form, get the assessment, and that would be the biggest value. It's totally free, so I would take advantage of that.
Eye-opening and pretty scary too, but the kind of thing that if you have responsibilities in this area, you need to have happen. Thomas, thank you so much for being on with us today. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for your time and insights in the Q&A, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Keith. It's been a pleasure.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for the sessions. We do have one more gift card to give away, though, and we're going to do that right now. Our final $300 gift card prize drawing today is happening now, and we have a winner. The winner of this last Amazon gift card is Eric Tempest from Wisconsin. Congratulations to you, Eric. Sit tight and you'll be hearing from us. And as I have said in some previous events here lately, with that $300, I am perfectly willing to be the recipient of a Christmas present. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, so that is it for the gift cards too. Next, so if you were enjoying this event today, you might be thinking it's the kind of thing that your company might want. What we did for these companies today, we can do for you. We also have custom webinars for any kind of event you would like to put on. So if you're interested in this, please let us hear from you. You see the email up there. It's connect@actualtechmedia.com. Get in touch with us, and we will get right back in touch with you. We also have a great, huge event coming up tomorrow. Look at it there up on the slide. Is a virtual summit. Summit for us means a really big event with tons and tons of vendors, and you can see some of them there. This is about designing your 2024 tech strategy, cloud security, AI, data protection and infrastructure. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. That is happening tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. So you Californians and others over there might have to get up a little early, but I think you'll find it will be well worth it. So sign up today for that and reserve your place in the event for tomorrow. And folks, with that, we are done now. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our presenters for putting together these awesome presentations and for the Q&As that we did. Some great stuff through that. I want to thank Rubrik, Delinea, and Pantera for being here with us. And I want to thank all of you attendees for being here, for being on and spending part of your day with us. I always enjoy doing this with you. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I will see you in the next event. Take care, everyone.